When Americans leave the USA, they don't just cross borders, they cross reality settings. The Wi-Fi drops, the confidence buffer disappears, and suddenly the land of freedom starts buffering too. Every country has culture shock, but Americans experience something deeper. The moment they realize the world works perfectly fine without them. This isn't about mocking travelers. It's about watching a nation built on certainty try to survive in places that run on context. A woman in Helsinki walked into a cafe and saw a menu in Finnish. She looked at me, panicked, and said, "Do you guys not translate it for tourists?" I said, "We did. That's why it's in Finnish." She blinked, then whispered to her husband, "They must really not want visitors." The barista quietly handed her a pastry shaped like humility. An American man on a Berlin metro whispered to me, "Is something wrong? Why is everyone so quiet?" I said, "They're commuting." He looked terrified, like he'd entered a horror movie called The People Who Don't Small Talk, when he tried to break the silence with a loud, "Hey everyone, where's the party?" A German woman turned expressionless and said, "Inside, where it belongs." At a restaurant in Seoul, an American tried to tip the waiter. The waiter refused politely. The man kept insisting, "No, take it. You earned it." The waiter smiled. "Sir, in our culture, service is part of the job." The American froze. "Then, how do you motivate people?" The waiter bowed slightly. "We just pay them." Politeness is a social currency, but exchange rates vary. In America, friendliness opens doors. In Europe or Asia, it sometimes triggers suspicion. Americans abroad often learn that silence can be a form of respect and that smiling at strangers isn't always an invitation. In Prague, a tourist taped an American flag patch to his backpack. He said it was for safety, so people know I'm from the good guys. A Czech student walking by whispered, "We're the loud guys." The man didn't hear. He was too busy asking where Starbucks was. At a street food stall, an American asked, "Can you make this as a sandwich instead?" The cook stared at him, then the tagine, then said, "Yes, sir. I will put stew in bread." He did it. It collapsed instantly. The American called it authentic. The cook called it Tuesday. An American couple in Vienna tried to find dinner at midnight. Everything was closed. The husband sighed. "How can people live like this?" A local man passing by said, "We rest. You should try it." They looked at him like he'd just pitched communism. Abroad, Americans meet a radical idea that life isn't optimized for speed and not every system is built for convenience. Sometimes closed doesn't mean inefficient. It means people are living instead of working. A tourist complained to me, "None of these streets have real names. It's all in French." I said, "We're in France." He blinked. Still, his wife added, "They should at least use English subtitles." Somewhere, a philosopher sighed. An American woman shouted at a cashier, "You're charging people to pee? That's a human right." The cashier replied softly, "It's a euro, madam, not a revolution." The woman filmed herself for TikTok. "I just exposed European corruption." Two guys from Florida landed in Amsterdam and decided to walk to Belgium. They thought it would take an hour. 6 hours later, they were still in Amsterdam, eating fries and Googling, "How far is too far?" A Dutchman cycling past muttered, "America really is flat." Scale is cultural. In the US, you drive for hours for brunch. In Europe, for hours means you've changed languages twice. When Americans travel, geography stops being background noise and becomes a personality test. In Italy, a man saw the bidet in his hotel and thought it was a tiny sink for dogs. He washed his socks in it. When told what it really was, he screamed, "I used that water on my face." The receptionist said, deadpan, "Then you have truly experienced Italy." A businessman accidentally bumped into a Japanese commuter. The local bowed an apology. The American said, "No, no, it's my fault." They spent a full minute apologizing louder and louder until both missed their train. A school kid nearby whispered, "Diplomacy in action." At a cafe in Sweden, an American asked for a coffee refill. The barista said, "We don't do that." He froze. "You mean I have to pay again?" She nodded. "Yes, for more coffee." He looked betrayed, like democracy had failed him personally. A woman stood on a windy cliff in Algarve and said, "This beach would be perfect if it had a Margaritaville." The locals just stared at the Atlantic, as if asking it for forgiveness. Americans don't travel poorly. They travel honestly. They bring their comfort systems with them. Refills, air conditioning, RCC food. And when those vanish, they meet the raw version of the world. One that doesn't bend for convenience, only for connection. A tourist cut a line at a London museum and shouted, "In America, we just go if no one's moving." The man behind him said, "In Britain, we just queue and judge you silently." The silence was deafening. An American entered a co-ed sauna and gasped, "Everyone's naked." A Finnish man replied, "You are too." He grabbed a towel and yelled, "I didn't consent to Europe." The Finn shrugged, "Europe consents to you." At a supermarket, an American yelled, "Where are the free bags?" The cashier said, "You bring your own." The American muttered, "What is this?" "A test." A woman behind him whispered, "He failed." A student on exchange asked the landlord, "Where's the dryer?" The man pointed at the balcony. "You mean air?" "Yes, it's free." To many Americans, minimalism feels like deprivation. But a broad efficiency isn't lack, it's identity. When everything isn't supersized, you start realizing how much space confidence can take up. At dinner, an American ordered just water. The waiter asked, "With gas or without?" He replied, "Without payment." The table next to him applauded softly. A woman stormed to reception. "Your 5 stars don't have room service." The clerk said, "We have stars for architecture, not snacks." She gasped. "Then what are we paying for?" He smiled. History. An American yelled in frustration, "My phone says no service. How do I get data?" The guide said, "By a local SIM." He frowned. "You mean it's not global by default?" The guide laughed. "Your arrogance is." An American couple complained their food took 20 minutes. The waiter said, "We cook when you order." The woman sighed. "In the U.S., it's faster." He smiled. "So is the flavor." In the U.S., speed equals care. Abroad, care equals time. When you stop rushing, you stop mistaking slowness for failure and start tasting patience as flavor. When Americans leave the USA, they think they're exploring the world. But the real plot twist, the world is exploring them. Every culture holds up a mirror, and America's reflection is often too bright to see clearly. An American tourist ran into a shop yelling, "Do you guys sell umbrellas that actually work?" The shopkeeper looked out at the storm and said, "Sir, this is Scotland. The rain wins." He bought 3 umbrellas, all lost within minutes. At a mountain guest house, a woman screamed, "There's no outlet for my hair straightener." The owner said, "There's no electricity after sunset." She paused, horrified. How do people live like this? He smiled, with good hair and peace. In a Thai temple, a man wearing sunglasses shouted, "This place has great acoustics." A monk turned slowly and whispered. Silence also echoes. The man grinned. "Cool quote, bro." The monk closed his eyes, possibly forever. An American couple complained to the guide. "Our app said, sunshine?" The guide replied, "The app is from California." The weather is from Earth. They demanded a refund for false advertising. Nature did not respond. Leaving the U.S. is like quitting control cold turkey. You can't Yelp the weather. You can't complain to the manager of gravity in a system built on customization. The shock of no options is the first real spiritual experience. A man in Nairobi asked, "Where's the nearest McDonald's?" The taxi driver said, "There isn't one." He froze. "Then how do people know where to eat?" The driver laughed. We follow smell, not marketing. A student plugged in her hairdryer, sparks flew, and the power went out. She yelled, "Why do you guys have different outlets?" The hotel clerk said, "So visitors can learn humility." She said, "Can I leave a 1-star review?" He nodded. "Yes, but the electricity won't read it." An American man asked for ranch dressing. The waiter said, "We have olive oil and vinegar." The man looked betrayed. "You mean you don't have America's favorite sauce?" The waiter replied, "We already have flavor." A woman shouted, "Where are your gluten-free options?" The shopkeeper said, "In America." She blinked, unsure whether to be offended or educated. Abroad, Americans discover that freedom isn't infinite choice. It's trust in what's given. Not every aisle needs 47 cereals. Sometimes freedom is realizing you don't have to choose. You just have to taste. A man circled the city looking for parking. A local said, "Most people just bike." He replied, "I don't trust things without engines." The local pointed to a canal. "We also swim." He drove to Belgium instead. On a bus in Sweden, an American smiled at everyone. No one smiled back. He whispered to me, "Did I do something wrong?" I said, "You were just seen." He nodded solemnly. Creepy. At a monastery in Bhutan, a tourist held up his phone mid-ceremony. "Smile, monks." A monk smiled, then deleted the photo himself. Enlightenment achieved. Not for the tourist. An American in a Paris hotel tried to start elevator chat. "So, where are you from?" The Frenchman replied, from silence. The elevator beeped, possibly out of respect. In America, silence feels like failure, a gap to fill. A broad silence is communication. It says, "We're coexisting, not performing." To Americans, that can feel like rejection. To others, it's relief. A man tried to pay with dollars. The cashier refused. He said, "But it's stronger money." She replied, "Not here." He stared at the bill like it had betrayed democracy. A tourist shouted, "Why is my drink warm?" The waiter said, "It's room temperature." He yelled, "Room temperature is communist." The waiter smiled. Then, "Welcome to equality." A woman in Japan told the hotel clerk, "I can't sleep. My body's on American time." He nodded politely. Time zones are not suggestions. She gasped as if gravity had spoken back. An American tried to drive through the pedestrian area. A police officer stopped him. He said, "Sorry, GPS told me I could." The officer replied, "Your GPS is not the law." He looked heartbroken. First sign of unlearning. Americans think technology flattens culture, but GPS, Google, and Apple Pay don't explain how people think. You can navigate foreign streets and still be completely lost in meaning. When Americans leave the USA, they don't lose intelligence, they lose dominance. The world isn't anti-American. It's just already complete. For the first time, they see systems that run without their logic. People who thrive without their optimism and kindness, that doesn't sound like customer service. Travel doesn't humble Americans instantly. It exhausts them first. Then somewhere between confusion and realization, they stop performing America and start being human. That's what really happens when Americans leave the USA. They meet the rest of the planet and accidentally themselves.